Have you ever imagined what it's like to commit the perfect crime? Not just a regular heist, but a masterpiece of criminal ingenuity where every move is calculated, every detail planned to the finest point, and no trace left behind. Sounds impossible, doesn't it? But what if I told you it's more than possible? What if you could be part of it? Let me tell you a story about how the thrill of pulling off such a crime becomes a nightmare. The question is, will you survive it? Act 1. The game begins. It all started in a dark, smoky bar on the outskirts of the city. Vince, the mastermind, sat across from me, cool as ice, his eyes cutting through me like he already knew I'd say yes. Vince wasn't just a regular guy. He was sharp, meticulous, and always 3 steps ahead. He didn't plan crimes. He engineered them, like an architect building something perfect. "Investborg," he said, swirling his whiskey. "It's one of the largest banks in the city. If we pull this off, we're set for life. But this isn't just about money. It's about proving we're the best." We weren't just any group. There was Lena, an expert in social engineering who could manipulate anyone to tell her anything. She had a way of getting people to trust her instantly, part charm, part cold calculation. Then there was Kevin, our tech genius, who could break into any system with nothing more than a laptop. Mike, my old friend, was a master of forging documents. And then there was me. I was the logistics guy, the one who figured out how we'd get in and out without a trace. We all had our roles. Vince, of course, was the leader, the one who kept us all in line and made us feel like a part of something bigger. But looking back, I wonder if we ever really knew what game we were playing. We were too hungry for that big score to see the traps. Act 2. Preparation. Vince was obsessed with perfection. Every step had to be flawless, every variable accounted for. So, we didn't rush. We spent months preparing, making sure nothing could go wrong. Lena was the key to it all. She got herself hired at the bank, blending in like she'd been working there for years. Every day, she gathered more information, learning the routines of the guards, mapping out where the security cameras were, memorizing the times when the vault would be open. She had one job, to get us inside without anyone noticing, and she did it perfectly. Kevin's job was to take control of the bank's security system. He hacked into their network, studied the alarm system, and worked on disabling it. He managed to set up a window, 20 minutes where the cameras would show nothing but empty halls. 20 minutes was all we needed. Mike forged the IDs and security passes. They were so perfect, even I was convinced they were real. We were going to walk in and out like ghosts. And me? I was in charge of the getaway. I mapped out every possible escape route, from traffic patterns to blind spots in the city's surveillance network. It had to be perfect. And yet, as we got closer to the heist, something gnawed at me. I didn't know it then, but I should have trusted my instincts. Act 3. The heist. The day came. It was a cold, rainy evening, perfect for staying unnoticed. Kevin, Mike, and I were in a van a few blocks from the bank. Lena was already inside, playing her part. Everything was set, and Kevin had just disabled the cameras. "Let's go," Vince said, his voice calm. Like we were heading out for coffee instead of pulling off one of the biggest bank heists of our lives. We walked in through a service entrance, badges in hand. The guards barely looked at us. Lena had done her job. Everyone believed we were supposed to be there. Kevin kept a close eye on the security system, making sure nothing triggered an alarm. We had 20 minutes to pull this off. The vault was massive, more than I expected. Mike had the codes Lena had acquired, and he opened it without a hitch. Inside were stacks of cash, gold bars, bonds, more money than I could have ever dreamed of. We grabbed what we could and walked out just as smoothly as we had come in. It felt too easy. "Good job," Vince said once we were back in the van, his voice still as calm as ever, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Act 4. After the heist. For the first few days, everything was quiet. We had split the money and decided to lay low for a while. Vince told us we'd meet again in 2 weeks to divide the rest of the take and finalize our escape. We were supposed to stay out of sight, not attract attention. But then Vince disappeared. At first, we thought it was just part of the plan. He'd done this before, gone off the grid for a while to avoid heat. But days turned into a week, and there was still no word. Mike was the first to crack. "He set us up," he shouted when we met again in the same bar. "He took the money and ran." I wanted to believe Vince was still working the plan, but doubt had already started creeping in. I tried calling him. No answer. Kevin checked Vince's accounts. Nothing. It was like he had vanished into thin air, taking everything with him. But Vince wasn't the kind of guy who just ran. No, if he was gone, it was because he wanted to be. And the more we searched, the more we realized just how deep this game went. Act 5. The hunt for the traitor. We had no choice. We had to find Vince. Kevin started digging into every digital trail Vince could have left, but he found nothing. Vince had erased himself from existence. It was like he had planned this from the start. But then, out of nowhere, I got a message. No name, no number, just a simple line. "He's where you least expect him." I showed the message to the others. Mike wanted to track it, but Kevin said it was untraceable. Lena, though, she seemed more composed than I expected. "He's playing with us," she said, her voice colder than usual. "This is all part of his plan." We searched for days, chasing shadows, following dead-end leads. Vince was everywhere and nowhere. It was clear now. He had anticipated everything, even this, and in doing so, he had turned us against each other. Suspicion was growing. I could feel it in Mike's eyes when he looked at me, and Kevin was starting to question every move we made. Even Lena, who had always been so steady, seemed distant. It was Vince's masterpiece. He had turned us into players in his own twisted game. Act 6. The showdown. Weeks passed, and we finally got a lead that took us to a remote tropical island. There were whispers that Vince had bought a secluded property there, a place to hide until everything cooled down. We booked flights, desperate to finally end this nightmare. When we arrived, the island was as isolated as they said. A few scattered houses, dense jungle, and barely any people. One house at the edge of the island seemed abandoned, but the door was open. We entered cautiously, guns drawn, and there he was, Vince, sitting at a table, sipping wine like nothing had happened. He smiled as we approached, but it wasn't the smile of a man who had won. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting. "I knew you'd come," he said, setting down his glass. His calmness was infuriating. After everything he'd done, he still thought he was in control. Mike lunged at him, grabbing him by the collar. "Where's the money, you son of a bitch?" Vince didn't flinch. "Right where it needs to be," he said. "But it's not about the money, is it? It never was." "What do you mean?" I asked, stepping closer. Vince glanced at me and smiled. "You think this was all about getting rich?" "No. It was about proving something, to myself, to you. You were all part of my plan, from the start. Every step you took, I guided you. Every decision, I orchestrated. You played your parts perfectly." I felt a chill run down my spine. He wasn't lying. This wasn't just a heist. It had been a game all along, and we were the pawns. Act 7. The collapse of trust. Mike's grip tightened on Vince, but I could see the rage was giving way to fear. Vince had outplayed us at every turn, and now he had us cornered. But there was something else, a small device Vince casually placed on the table. It was an encrypted hard drive. "Everything you've done," Vince said, his voice cold and calculated. "It's all here. The heist, the planning, even your little trip to find me. One push of a button, and this goes to the authorities." Kevin's face turned white as a sheet. "You've been recording us this whole time?" Vince chuckled. leaning back in his chair. Not just recording, manipulating, controlling. You were too focused on your score to realize you were already in my trap. Lena, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. Her voice was calm but edged with steel. So what's the endgame, Vince? You've got us here. What do you want? Vince's smile widened. What I've always wanted. Control. I have all the leverage, and you're all at my mercy. But I'll give you a choice. Walk away, forget the money, and I'll let you live. Try to take me down, and I'll bury you all. The room went silent. We were trapped, and Vince knew it. Act 8. Turning the tables. But something changed in that moment. Lena wasn't the type to be cornered. She stepped even closer to Vince, her eyes locked on his. You think you've won, don't you? You think we're trapped, but you forgot something. Vince raised an eyebrow. And what's that? You're alone. We're not. Before Vince could react, Mike slammed him against the table, knocking the hard drive out of his hand. Kevin grabbed it and started working on decrypting the files. Vince tried to stand, but Lena blocked him, her voice icy and firm. You underestimated us. The hard drive was our ticket out. If Kevin could wipe it clean, we could erase any trace of the heist and finally be free. But Vince wasn't going down easily. You think you can just walk away from this? Vince spat, his voice rising. I'll find you. No matter where you go, I'll be there. But this time, we weren't afraid. For the first time, we had the upper hand. Act 9. The final decision. As Kevin worked on the drive, Mike kept Vince in check, while Lena and I kept watch. The tension was unbearable. One wrong move, and it could all fall apart. But we were too far in to back down now. What's on this drive? Kevin asked, his voice tight with concentration. Everything, Vince said, his voice dripping with malice. Enough to send all of you away for life. Kevin looked up at me, his face pale. We have to decide. Do we destroy this, or do we use it against him? Destroying the drive would erase all evidence, but it also meant losing any leverage we had over Vince. Keeping it meant risking everything, but it could also be our ticket to freedom. I looked at my team, my friends, and realized the decision was mine to make. We use it, I said, my voice firm. We erase Vince from this game, once and for all. Act 10. The end of the game. Kevin wiped the drive clean, erasing every trace of the heist, every recording Vince had made. The moment it was done, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. We had won. But as we turned to leave, Vince's voice cut through the air. You think it's over? You think you've won? We ignored him, walking out of the house, leaving Vince behind in the wreckage of his own twisted game. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Vince was too dangerous, too smart to be beaten so easily. As we sailed away from the island, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still playing his game. Epilogue. A new beginning. Weeks passed. We went our separate ways, trying to rebuild our lives. But the shadow of Vince still lingered. Every time my phone rang, I expected to hear his voice. Every time I walked down the street, I felt like someone was watching. And then, one night, I got a message. It was brief, chilling, and unmistakable. You thought it was over. It's not. Vince. He was still out there, still playing. And this time, I wasn't sure we could win. Final words. If you've made it this far, I want to hear your thoughts. Could you have made a different choice? Do you think Vince really lost? Or was this all just another move in his game? Let's discuss in the comments. And remember, sometimes the most dangerous game is the one you think you've already won.